You're listening to Shark Bone. This is episode 3, being recorded Monday, March 29th, 2010. My name is Devin.
I'm Jarvis.
And I'm Doug.
Wait, we got a third person? Alright, Doug, you're going to have to tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Doug Dalton from NeonCon, among other things. And I'm also a member of the Werewolf Pack.
He is. He is a member of the Wolf Pack of the werewolf game I am currently running. Friend of ours and a kind of organizer guy for the local gaming scene around here in Vegas.
Yeah, we've invited him here to take part today because we're going to be doing our first Chum episode, which is an episode that doesn't have anything to do with our normal program, but we still talk about gaming stuff.
That will be explained shortly when we
will.
start the Chum episode.
It will. Anyway, let's jump right in to today's topics. For our GM Garden, we're talking about the movie Unbreakable.
Unbreakable. What made you pick Unbreakable? Bruce Willis, around 2000-ish.
Yeah, 2000, Samuel
M.
Jackson. M. Night Shyamalan.
Shamalama Ding Dong.
Shyamalan. What made you pick Unbreakable as a movie topic?
There was a time where I was a really big fan of M. Night Shyamalan's movies.
Okay. Are you no longer?
Not his later stuff, no.
Okay.
No, those, what were the movies? Sixth Sense.
Lady in the Water.
Lady in the Water was fantastic.
I haven't seen that one yet.
You should.
It's quite
Maybe I
good.
should. But Unbreakable was one of my favorites because it takes a normal person and puts them into a situation that they know nothing about.
True.
And I really liked that concept. And the movie pulled off what it was trying to do, I think, very well.
I think so as well. I didn't know that I was going to watch like a superhero comic book Batman Superman movie when I signed on, and I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, I didn't know either.
It was really cool. It kind of snuck up on me and handled it in a very this is how that would really happen.
It's arguably the predecessor to Christopher Nolan's Batman movies.
I could see that. It has the same tone. It's like a very understated, almost somber,
Yeah.
tone. Like everything's really serious.
Yes.
Well, even in the approach of how realistic superheroes are treated.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's more what I meant in the fact that it doesn't. You don't need tights to be a superhero, and
No.
how that might
And
work.
you can end a fight with the villain with a lot of bruises,
Yes.
which is cool.
Yeah, I always like it when the heroes are human.
Okay, so you like the movie Unbreakable. We all like it.
Yes.
What made you think that it was something that could lend to RPG plots or themes or add to our games?
The thing about the movie that I think is really cool that would be awesome to translate into a game that I haven't seen in any games is the goal of the villain. The Mr. Glass character, Samuel L. Jackson, he's doing all these nefarious, evil things, and it's not to gain power, it's not to get his name out there, it's to find his equal. He's looking for, his opposite. He's looking for his opposite. He's saying, all right, I am fragile and I am breakable. There's got to be someone out there that's at the opposite end of the spectrum. So it's like scientific research for him.
I watched the movie this afternoon, and I was remembering that the last two episodes, both episodes we've talked about like villains that are truly believe in what they're doing, and they don't believe that what they're doing is evil.
Right.
We see it as evil, but they see it as good or as the only way to produce a greater good, etc. So they'll do things that we don't want to do to try and produce a good. And if this episode is the one where we hash that out and talk about that on how it makes such awesome villains, then we totally can. But otherwise, we can save that for another day. Because that's something that definitely needs to be discussed. That was probably the biggest thing that I took away from watching Unbreakable today. Samuel L. Jackson's Mr. Glass was awesome.
Yes, it was.
He was awesome, but I would disagree that he literally thought that what he was doing was good to make a better world. I think he was much more narcissistic and wanted to have. He wanted to be the bad guy. He clearly knew he was the villain. He knew he was murdering people, and he wanted to do it just so he could find, a worthy opponent. So I don't think there's anything the misguided villain about Mr. Glass at all. I think he's one jacked up dude that.
Yeah, I don't think he was misguided at all. I don't think he believed that what he was doing was
without
good.
Sorry. Without trying to argue about, like, spend the episode arguing about what Mr. Glass was actually believing in, I will say, as the only host who did his homework and watched the movie today, that there are several key scenes where there's one where Mr. Glass says, "Now I know who I am," at the very end of the movie.
Okay.
Now that I know you're the hero, Bruce Willis, I know who I am, the villain. He didn't know before.
Okay.
That's one.
That's cool.
There's also a moment where he says, we live in mediocre times. People are losing hope. They can't believe in themselves, let alone, they can't believe in their own goodness, their own power to change, like, their environment and the world around them, let alone believe that somebody else has that power. They need somebody that can do that. They need somebody like you. They need a hero. He was trying to find that hero, I think. And you guys can disagree, and you can call him a dick, but I think he was totally believing in everything he was doing, and he was trying to find the hero because he wanted that hero in the world, and if it meant that he had to be a villain to bring in the hero, so be it.
You know, all the times that I've watched the movie.
it.
What's that?
Now you're going to make me go back and rewatch it.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
me too.
Terrible. Go back and watch that horrible movie.
No, I mean it in that way. It's like, now I want to watch it with that frame of reference.
You should, because that's part of the reason why I like it so much.
I've never noticed that, and all the times that I have watched that movie, I've never
Go back and watch it. It comes up. There's like 3 key scenes where it totally convinced me that was his point of view.
So how would we translate that into a role-playing game story?
Which part are we translating? Anything?
Yeah, anything. The part that you thought was the coolest that you would want to see in the game.
That would be Mr. Glass as the villain. Aside from that, I like the idea that Bruce Willis was a hero, that he had strength, he was unbreakable. He even had a potent phobia of water. That was his kryptonite.
Yes.
So he had all these things, but he didn't know. So it would be very interesting. For a long time, I've wanted to do the bait and switch game, where I wanted to sit a bunch of players down and say, okay, make characters. We're going to play a Call of Cthulhu story. And then all of a sudden, their Call of Cthulhu investigators find, say, a Stargate.
Okay.
You know, but I don't even have to explain what it is. And I don't have to say, well, of course you do, it's Stargate. But I don't have to say, hey, let's play a Stargate game. You know, and then in your Call of Cthulhu game, I can say you find this odd stone ring. You know, and it has all these symbols on the side. You try to decipher them, and you realize that the ring kind of turns, and it's like a dial. And it would take you, I don't know how many games, depending on how well I did it, to even realize that you were playing a Stargate game. But that would be a lot of fun. It would be fascinating. I've always wanted to do it, but I'm always afraid that I'll lose the players because they'll sign on for Call of Cthulhu and then be disappointed that I'm actually surprising them with a Stargate game. If it was a group I knew really well and knew that they secretly loved Stargate, all of them, then I think I could get away with it. But I've always wanted to do that. And I think Bruce Willis's character, like that he's a superhero but just doesn't know it, would be a really interesting way to tell a story. Because you could sit players down, like say for a superhero game, and say, make a modern day character and tell me something that your character's good at. Right. You say, oh, my guy's a good accountant. And then you as the GM don't tell him that he's actually supernaturally good at math and numbers because he's never noticed yet.
Right.
So that might be kind of fun. It might be an interesting way to approach.
Yeah.
I had a very similar thought because the first thing that jumped out at me was the fact that he doesn't really know what he is, and that people are pointing to both Mr. Glass and then eventually his kid are pointing him to his supernatural abilities, but he doesn't quite know if they're real, whether he should embrace them or not. And I actually thought that it was a really interesting analogy to the first turn or first change in Werewolf.
To the first change of Werewolf?
Where, we're playing these characters that some of them know their guru or know they may have the ability and others don't, and then they're figuring it out. And I thought it might be an interesting take from a GM's point of view to not even let the players know, not just determine, okay, well, you're really good at math. Okay, well, I know you're going to become a super numbers guy. As a GM, say, okay, either randomly or based on what you know about the person, these are going to be their superpowers, and they're going to discover them as they go. Now, I would take a certain group of role players who are interested and able to say, when the GM says your superpower is you smell like cheese and mice come to you. You know, be able to roll with that and turn it into a fun play experience. But as a player, I think that would be really cool. It would be unsettling. You know, it would be uncomfortable at first as you're trying to figure this thing out, but it would be a really interesting play experience.
I think so.
Yeah. There is a game. There's a White Wolf game called Ep003, which is it's their modern day. It's their 6 years in the future or so, slightly science fiction superpower game. And it's not in their World of Darkness series; it's in their Aeon Trinity universe. But this game's called Aberrant, and it's about playing superheroes. And John, somebody we all know, ran the game for a little while this summer. And his approach was that we just brought in characters and we gave him personalities and gave him backgrounds and as much information as we could on our characters. And if we had superpowers that we really, really, really wanted for our characters, we could send him a note and he might give those powers to us. If we had powers that we really, really, really didn't want, then he would probably not give us those powers, but we had no idea what kind of superhero we were going to be.
Okay.
So we just made actual people. And we knew we were going to get superpowers, but we didn't know which ones. And then John, with his extensive knowledge of the game setting and the rules and all those kinds of things, actually sat down and said, okay, for this character... So my friend Tony made a character that was fascinated with movies, old movies. He loved Humphrey Bogart from like Maltese Falcon and Casablanca and stuff like that. So he loved that, and he loved a couple other movie characters. And John said, what did you want to be when you grew up? You know, when your character was a child, and his character wanted to be a football star. What are you now? Who's your favorite movie star? And all these things. And John actually gave Tony's character a split personality and a wide array of superpowers. But his super detective-y powers only came when his Humphrey Bogart personality arose. So he gave him this flaw of a split personality, and his split personality was that sometimes he would think and act like Humphrey Bogart as a noir detective.
Okay.
And then sometimes he would act like this Cornhusker football star. And sometimes he would act like this girl character. And each time one of those personalities came to the forefront, a different superpower would come.
That's pretty cool.
And he also gave Tony the power called like clone, which is like a multiple man type thing, so that Tony could actively split himself up. And Humphrey Bogart could come out of him and stand over there. And Tony and Humphrey Bogart could have a conversation. And then his Cornhusker football star, with all the strength and speed, could appear over there. And he could send them out to do different things. And that guy had the super speed, so only when he came out, or when that personality was forefront, did his character actually have access to the super speed. So it would kind of be like...
That's interesting.
It would be like taking Superman and all his wide array of superpowers. Nobody needs that many, but Superman has them all. And to actually break them into, only when Superman is in this form does he actually get his ability to fly. And only when he's in this form does he get his super strength. It was very interesting. And my character ended up with some weird powers. Because I wanted to be a guy that hunted superheroes, so I ended up with abilities to like suppress powers that were being used in my presence and things like that. It was kind of interesting. It was a really cool approach.
That is cool. Thinking about Mr. Glass, I would kind of like to run a Hunter the Vigil game because in Hunter, the characters are mainly human and they're hunting these supernaturals.
Yes.
So I'd like to take one supernatural, I haven't decided which kind, probably vampires because they're my favorite, and have this vampire doing things in the city looking for his equal. He might be 1,000 years old or something, and he just gets bored doing the day-to-day vampire thing. So he's like, I want a challenge. I'm going to go find one.
What kind of things would he do to find his challenge? And what do you think his equal might be? What it is that he's searching for?
I was thinking mainly in battle because I like games that have a lot of physical confrontation.
Okay.
So I had this image of this vampire somehow turning like a SWAT officer or something, and then he challenges him into arena combat and kills him. So he's like, okay, so a SWAT officer wasn't any good. So basically there's just these dead bodies to turn up in really weird ways, and the hunters hear about it and they're like, what's going on? So finally the hunters would be the subject of this vampire's desire to be equals. He looks at them and says, they might be my equal. And so he'll try and get them turned.
So I'm having a little flash of like the Riddler Batman scenario or Joker Batman thing.
Okay.
So the Riddler or the Joker, I'm a super smart supervillain, and I'm way too much for regular cops to handle. So I'm gonna go get in Batman's business just because I want an equal opponent.
Yeah, I didn't think about it that way, but that totally could work too.
So maybe any kind of villain, like a vampire or whatever. And if he's super political, then he's putting out like all these political maneuverings, kind of in a hope, almost fishing for somebody that's gonna realize that there's a power behind the moves and come and try to stop him. Or if it's a super strong guy, then he's gonna go beating up everybody he can find. You know, if it's like a Juggernaut character.
Yeah.
He's gonna just go around picking fights and go, there's gotta be somebody that can give me a fair fight. Like, I'm bored. All these people are squishy.
Yeah.
So that might be interesting. As they just, and that's their villainous deed, is that they just run around town, looking for somebody that's competition.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool, because I don't think I've ever run a villain that has that for a motivation before.
Yeah, it's kind of neat.
What about you, Doug? What would you pull from Unbreakable?
I thought you were asking Doug what his villainous motivation was.
What is your villainous motivation, Doug?
I must rule the world. I think the thing I definitely pull is what I mentioned earlier when Jarvis was talking about the idea of whether it's a supers game or not, this idea that the characters don't know the players don't know what their characters are, and that they're kind of determined for them. And maybe it's a roll of the die. I mean, maybe it's capricious in that sense, and maybe the GM has a specific concept that he's going for. But I think as a player, that would be really interesting. That's one of the things I've taken away from, kind of inadvertently, from my werewolf experience, where I'm kind of learning the game as I go, and it's really interesting to figure out what is and is not acceptable, or what does and does not work in the game. And so it's been a challenge, but it's also been fun. And so I think that would be really interesting to run a game like that, where the players don't really know who they are, who their characters are at all. And particularly when you come from, as I do, primarily D20 background, where you have the min-maxers who twink out every character and basically have their character progression already planned from level 1 to 20.
Right. Yes.
Right. Which it's interesting, but it's essentially becomes a tactical minis game at some level, right?
Yes.
As opposed to a role playing game. I think that would be really interesting, because then you kind of force people. And my evil plan side of me says that'd be really great to put on some min-maxers and just watch them crap their pants as the game progresses. But they wouldn't have any fun. It's not necessarily fair to them. And I certainly wouldn't have any fun probably running it after session 4 when they're constantly pounding the table, not knowing because they're not comfortable with that style of play.
Right.
But if you get the right players, you get the right kind of people who are like, hey, let's just role play this out and see where it goes, and then more of a sandbox. I guess it's basically applying the sandbox approach to your character as opposed to the world.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It'd be
absolutely.
really interesting as a
I
player
gotcha.
to experience that, and then as a GM to run that, and then just to see what the players do with it. Because it would be like, I don't know, a bus is rushing at somebody, and the character he knows he might be super, so he jumps in front, and maybe he gets squished. Maybe he doesn't have super strength to stop the bus, but he has super durability, so the bus crumples around him and he doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, maybe
that's
the
the way
bus.
he just scribbled.
Maybe the bus crumples around. Maybe he has the super strength to stop it, or maybe he turns out that he can't stop the bus, but he has like a phasing ability, right. So he doesn't get harmed by the bus. The bus still wrecks and crashes into the building behind him. He says, well, I guess I couldn't stop it, but I learned this weird phasing power that I didn't think I had, but I guess I have now.
And an interesting bit of serendipity, I'm reading a book called Monster by A.J. Martinez.
Okay.
And the central character, I'm still only like a quarter of the way in the book, but the central character is a student of magic, and he goes around and captures escaped. He's basically a dog catcher for cryptozoological life.
Okay. So he captures Sasquatch and
exactly, which is really interesting. And but it hasn't been determined why this is. But every day he wakes up, he's a different color.
Weird.
Like his skin is blue one day.
Nice.
The next day his skin is green. The next day his skin is purple. Right. And so when he's blue, he's indestructible, and he's figured that out. So when he's blue, doesn't matter what hits him, he's going to live. When he's green, there's another thing. And then I just got into this part in the book where he wakes up and he's like, oh, crap, I'm purple.
I'm a new color.
I had no idea what that means.
Wow.
So he literally pulls out a notebook and he realizes in one scene, he's like, everybody else is talking about how this horrific stench. He's like, purple can't smell. You know, he's literally taking notes about who he
Purple
is.
can't smell.
You know,
Oh, that's awesome.
What kind of superpower is that?
Yeah.
you know, so I think that would be really interesting to run as a GM, and then also interesting to play as a player.
That would be.
Doug, when you find out what's going on in that book, you need to let me know.
I will.
Because that sounds fascinating.
Yeah,
It's an interesting book. It's a lot of fun. I'll hand it off when I'm done.
Excellent. Well, hey, let's step right over to our Grease Monkey segment.
Okay.
Today we're going to talk about experience systems.
There are a lot of them, I discovered.
I have experienced a few of them, but nowhere near the breadth that I'm sure you have.
I came to the realization that I played actually all of the ones that I marked down. And I marked down like 9 different experience systems. I started going through my RPG collection and just looking at books and realizing that there are a lot of different ways. There's more than I thought of ways to hand out XP.
Wow, I didn't know there were that many.
There's a bunch. There's a bunch. Let's start with what made you want to bring up experience as a topic for a way to tweak your game.
Well, recently, in the werewolf game that we've been going through, we've been using the keys system, which I'm sure we'll explain here in a little bit.
Yes.
But I found that me having to look for avenues to gain experience took away from the game experience for me, so it made me think about experience. And
Okay.
I like experience because it's a measurable, quantifiable way of seeing my character grow and seeing him improve. So I like experience. I just didn't want my entire game focus to become experience. So that just got me thinking on different ways experience is earned and gained and awarded through a game. I was like, hey, that might be a good topic.
Okay. What do you guys think about games that... most games have experience. Most games that we've played, most games that our listeners have played, they all have some kind of XP system. Your character gets quantifiably better.
Yeah.
He can punch things harder. He can hit things more often. He gets harder to hit himself, quantifiably better. Some games, they don't. A lot of superhero games, things like Spirit of the Century that are very pulpy,
Right.
play like Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones doesn't get better from one movie to the next. Batman doesn't get better from one adventure to the next. He's always Batman. And some of those games, you either just don't have experience at all, or you have the fact that your character can change. Like Indiana Jones could get over his fear of snakes in time.
Okay.
And he's not necessarily becoming better because then there might be something else. Like maybe he gets over his fear of snakes, but now all of a sudden in the 4th movie, Crystal Skull, we find that he has a son. So he's gotten over his fear of snakes, but now he has a son that could be just as much of a flaw or drawback to him. Because
Right.
his son could get in peril and all these things could happen. So a lot of games like Spirit of the Century and stuff will have an ability to change your character. If he's an ace pilot one day, then when it comes time for the next mission, you can actually swap the ace pilot to an ace gunfighter for that one mission. And then you can go back to being an ace pilot the next game.
Okay.
If you need to. Or Batman, like you'll see different skills of his come out on certain missions, certain story arcs. Even though he always had it, you just didn't really see it all the time. He
Right.
didn't focus on it. So what do you guys think about games that have no experience, no change in character, or games where your character gets quantifiably better? Which do you prefer? What are your thoughts on them?
For me, I think it depends on how long I plan on playing the game.
Okay.
For something that's only going to run 3 or 4 sessions, a system where my character does not grow and get better, that's acceptable because I'm concentrating on playing the story, and I'm not playing over a long period of time where I'm expecting to see some sort of growth. Whereas if I'm expecting to play for a period of time, I want to get that experience, and I want to be able to improve my character, and I want to see him grow from these experiences and become better. I think for me, the story would be much more centered on my character and not so much centered on the story.
Okay.
I think it also depends on. I think those are key things. What you just mentioned are key things that jump out at me. I think it also depends on the group. It depends on the people
Definitely.
that are at the table and the person running the game. Because if you have a group of fairly well-skilled storytellers and also fairly, or not fairly, but just genuinely honest people who are prepared to call each other on their BS, or more more likely they're mistakes. Like, oh, your character didn't do that 5 sessions ago. He wouldn't magically have this ability now. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was going in a different way. Then I think you can play without XP, right? Because that's a group that is all about the story and really willing to drive it forward that way. And that's, pretty fluid. But if you are in an extended campaign and other people just can't play that way, then you're going to get into balance issues or perceived balance issues, and I think that's where XP kind of fits in. We had a conversation a couple months back about how story games don't really fit into an organized play model.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand you at the time, but that was before I played Dread and Danger Patrol and everything else with you.
There was a lot you didn't understand at the time,
definitely. But now I get it, right? So now I understand why they wouldn't necessarily fit. So there would have to be some, if you were to take the story game model forward as an organized play, you'd have to find some way to keep everyone, not on a necessarily level playing field, but on a consistent point of measurement.
And you think experience helps with that?
I think it definitely can.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be, I kill Monster X, and I get 5,422 XP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which in this day and age is a little cumbersome, frankly.
Extremely.
Yeah.
One of my comments, I was going to bring it up later.
Which is interesting, not to jump ahead, but it's interesting that Pathfinder RPG in their organized play has done away with that. You get 1 to 3 XP per game session.
That's amazing.
Oh no, I take that back. You get 1 XP.
Oh,
You've
nice.
completed an adventure, you get an XP. Period. 1 XP. Every 3 XP, you level up.
That's amazing.
Wow. I just did that with my my D&D group on
That's
Friday
awesome.
because we were talking about keys and some were like, yeah, I think it's taken away from the story for me, and I'm just like, well, I'll just give you a set amount of XP at the end of every session. They're like, okay, and I'm like, at 4 XP you level up. You get 1 every session. If I think you did really good, I will give you another one.
That's actually almost exactly the Savage World style. It's very, very similar because it's like 1, 2, maybe 3 XP each session, and then I think after 5 XP, which is going to be like 2 or 3 sessions, then you get an advance and can buy a new ability for your character.
Yes.
All right, yeah, I was looking at the D&D system. I was thinking about it today when I was jotting down notes for all these different experience point systems. And I said, why do you need 16,000 XP or whatever to get level 8? Why can't it just be 16? Why can't you take all the XP and divide it like, oh, you just got 750 for killing that tiger. Let's just call it 7. Come on. Do we need to do all that extra math?
You know what's interesting?
Yeah.
Is I actually thought about this recently too, because as you know, I have a project that I'm working on that is in the super secret files. But,
So I've heard.
But
All I've heard is that you can't talk about this project, that you constantly talk about and tell me you can't tell me about it.
But one of the things I thought about is how you would advance XP over the course of time, and I think actually in many ways the way to simplify it is to use the CR or the monster ratings in D&D. The monster has a CR of 3. Well, why isn't that the XP?
So you just get 3 XP
You
for
kill
defeating
it,
that
you get
CR.
3 XP.
That's
You
glorious.
Makes
kill
sense to me.
You kill 4 of them, you get 12.
That's glorious. And
it grossly, and then you could take that and you could rack up, the 3 of them. Plus, there's a trap that's another 2, and this encounter gets you 15. It makes the math exponentially easier.
Yes, it does.
And almost directly related to the experience point system of Aegon, which is a Greek hero RPG that I was going to talk about later, because I'll bring that up in a second. So we like experience more than no experience, because we like to...
I wouldn't say that.
They each have their
I
place.
We like it for different things, perhaps.
Yeah, I love the fact, but it's also, I think, based on duration. Because
Yes.
the one-shot games, like when we played Shotgun Diaries, brilliant, no XP, let's just roll into the next character.
Yes, you don't need experience. Not in a one-shot game. Experience is very superfluous.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So what about taking all the XP that you've been acquiring and having a level up where almost all of your abilities get better, or half of them all improve at once. And the next level, the other half of your abilities all improve at once again, as opposed to a pay-as-you-go system where, like in White Wolf games or World of Darkness, you have 7 XP. What do you spend it on? Well, I'm going to spend 2 points over here to increase my firearms, and I'm going to spend 1 point to increase my strength. And then when I get 3 XP next game, I'm going to increase my academics, and you can just increase whatever you want as you go. What do you guys think about those two methods?
I like pay-as-you-go systems because I can justify the gains to myself in the game story.
By saying you've fought a bunch of tigers, so now your hand-to-hand skills and your survival animal skills have increased.
Yes.
Not necessarily your swimming ability.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. And with level up systems, you can do that to a point, but I feel much
better than
freer.
others.
Feel much freer and more in control with the pay-as-you-go systems, like White Wolf and Savage Worlds to an extent.
Yeah, anything that doesn't have levels is pretty much a pay-as-you-go system.
Yeah.
Doug?
Well, I would tend to agree. I think it's not just I fought tigers and now on my hand-to-hand's better. It might also be, for example, in the werewolf game where that we're playing, where you experience something, you're like, maybe we need that skill for next time around. I can't remember what it was. I think none of us had
Enigmas.
That
came up a bunch of times.
Maybe we should get some enigmas, because that might be a good thing, because clearly the campaign is telling us, and that seems to be more organic to me. Because if my character doesn't have enigmas and he's encounters something that requires them, he might say to himself, to become better and to level up, maybe I should pick a dot or two in enigmas because we might need that skill again to survive.
Yeah.
That seems to be a more organic way of approaching it rather than, ding, I hit level 4 and now suddenly I can pick 1 feat. Or,
yes.
You guys, by the way, probably ruined me for the way I run D20.
I look forward to having a lot more games with you and getting you, used to even newer ideas still.
I mean, I still enjoy that
and
experience.
then actually seeing you run a D&D game, because I'd be really curious to see how that D&D game would look.
That's what
after I rubbed off on you a bit.
A home campaign would be totally different.
Of course.
Totally different.
Well, hey, let's go ahead and start talking about the different experience systems there are.
Ways to hand out experience. Number one is GM awards. This is actually the same in D&D as it is in like a White Wolf style. You spend the experience in different ways. In D&D, you just accumulate it until you finally level up. In White Wolf, you spend it as you go on whatever you want to spend it on.
Right.
But in both systems, the GM is just handing you experience. So in D&D, he says that tiger was worth 800 XP, and this bull orc over here is worth 1,400. And so he just gives you a total every 2 games, every 1 game, after every encounter, however he does it.
Right.
Whereas in like a White Wolf or Savage Worlds, they say, okay, each session is worth like 2 XP, and you did a really good job role playing today, so that's an extra XP, and you were really funny. That's another XP. And you know what? You brought pizza, and that's kind of cool. So I'll give you an XP for that. So that's one way. That's the way we're probably most used to.
Yes, I can agree with that.
Questions, comments, pros or cons?
I like GM awards because as a player, it's not something extra I have to think about.
I don't like it because as a GM, it's something extra I have to think about.
There's pros and cons to each side.
And to take the middle ground as a player or a GM, it can conceivably put you in a position where one of your players feels like they're being treated that the favoritism is at the table.
There's that.
Or, either they're receiving favoritism or they're not receiving it, and therefore, they feel slighted or something.
That's true.
Right.
And so it creates that. In some ways, it's like giving out raises at the end of a quarter.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, here's your raise. You didn't get such and such.
Actually, yeah. One thing I don't like about it, aside from the book work, in a White Wolf system is a little bit easier because it's every session is worth like 4 XP, and then these are 4 instances that you could award a bonus for.
Right.
If they did one of these 4 things, like were heroic, or if their character learned something, or if they showed up and participated in the session. If they weren't late. Give them a bonus XP. One thing I don't like about that is that a lot of those games will say, award extra XP for anybody that did a really good job role-playing. Well, if Doug's character is very verbose and he gives all these glorious speeches and he's using...
Which he does.
He does sometimes. And if he's using like a British accent the entire game, then he's doing a good job role-playing, in quotes here, that you can't see. Whereas if a newer player it comes to the table and they're very quiet and they're trying to soak in the game and they're trying to understand even the social dynamics at the table, and they're trying to go, okay, who's, when can I get in my words, and what should I do, and is this, I really want to murder this character, but is that what this game's about? Is this game about murder? Or
right.
I don't want to fight anybody? Then all of a sudden they're still role-playing, but are they being as good of a role player as the person who's giving the verbose speeches in the British accents and actually, playing the sailor who actually knows all these sailing songs?
Right.
So it was rough on my GM part to try and hand out awards for like good role playing and things like that.
I think that has to scale, though. I mean, I think it has to scale on your expectations of the player. So if you've got someone who's new and uncomfortable, then they get rewarded the same as the guy who, gets up, comes dressed as a pirate, although that's another topic, right? But they get, because that guy is clearly an accomplished role player, and it's not necessarily something particularly out of the ordinary. Or someone who's more shy and retiring, and then they make they decide to try out a voice, and that's I don't know if you're going to get the cool points, but maybe that's another
probably not for experience. No, that'll come up later on though.
Yeah, that might be you're rewarded on a scale. So if the person's new and uncomfortable and they do something cool, and then the person who just role plays out of hat, easily out of hand, then they've got to do something.
A little extra, a little above and beyond.
Right. And you also have to look at the way that people role play. Yes, Diego has given his share of wordy and lengthy speeches, but
Diego would be Doug's character in our game.
But at the same time, since he's kind of learned the way of the Silent Strider, there are other subtle role plays, like yesterday when we did our rite of passage, and Ernie, our Galliard, stepped up to sing the praises of our pack. The Arun sat back quietly and did what a Silent Strider Arun should do, which is sat there and was quiet and let everybody else say.
Yes, which is actually good role playing on your part,
but it's not active.
Yes,
so you have to be aware of what the character concept is, and then rating accordingly.
So that would be even more that the GM would have to keep track of, right?
Yes, and it's hard to do, and it's really hard to think about like once the game's over, because you definitely can't think about it while you're running the game.
Exactly.
And then the game ends, and you have to remember all those parts. You have to say, "Oh, that guy gave a really good speech." But then that other guy did a good job of being quiet when he gave that speech. And you can't remember that stuff when the game's over.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about our next
another
experience system.
We have so many. We'll try and get through them.
I don't think we're going to.
We'll see. Next one that I really like and has gotten a lot of favorable praise from the people I've run for is the key system, which comes from Shadow of Yesterday.
Yes.
Which is a derivative of the Fate system. It's a really, really good fantasy game if you guys like fantasy. And the key system basically says that each character picks a number of keys, and these keys are kind of core components or ingredients to that character's background. So a hardcore fighter character might have our typical Conan the Barbarian might have a key of vengeance to avenge the death of his lost love, and a key of bloodlust to see his foes driven before him. So those are his two keys. So every time he fulfills one of those, if he gets some revenge against, say, the cult that murdered his girl, then he gains XP. Every time he sees a foe driven before him, he gains XP. One thing that's kind of neat is that there's a gradient level. So if you defeat an easy foe, you just get like 1 XP. But if you defeat a mighty, mighty foe, and it costs you sorely, you like lost your left arm as a result, you get more XP than just the 1. The really neat thing about the key system is that Conan can have the key of vengeance and the key of bloodlust, and then his tricky little magic-using wizard companion can have key of the coward and key of the sage. So every time the coward runs from the fight, he gets XP. Every time the sage discovers some sort of forgotten ancient wisdom, he gets XP. So Conan gets XP for killing his enemies, and his little wizard buddy gets XP for hiding behind the couch while Conan is killing his enemies. That's really cool.
Yeah. I like the way the key system makes experience gaining a personal thing to each character, to where it's definitely driven by who that character is and not just how many monsters they've killed.
Yes.
Well, and it also drives, and the thing I love about keys, it drives character decisions, right? So if my character is the coward, then as much as I personally might want to charge into the fight, if I want to play my character, I have to run. Or I'm just not. There's no advantage to it. So there's a very material benefit to playing the character you say you're going to that your character is.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things I find all the time is a problem in the D20 world, and particularly in the OP world. Someone will say, "Oh, my character's XYZ," but then they play totally against what they just described their character to be because there's no reward system for true role playing. Oftentimes, right? So that's the thing I love about keys.
I will admit that it's the keys are a very good system. They're very unique. I'll say that. Some people love them, some people hate them. One of the biggest criticisms is that somebody will take Key of the Coward and then say, "Oh, I can never stand up for what I believe in because I won't get any XP. So the only thing I can do is just run away," and they feel confined and constricted because of the keys they've chosen. Whereas I like keys as a player because I can write them down on my sheet. And it's a way I can look at my sheet, and based on the keys I've chosen and what's going to get me XP, I'm instantly reminded of what's important to my character. So it's kind of neat, because I'm reminded that my character's a coward, and I go, oh yes, this is what I would do in this situation. And then I can choose to bring some interesting moments where I can go, okay, I'm a coward, and I'll get 5 XP if I run, but I really don't like that guy, and my friends are in real trouble, so I'm going to stay and just ignore the XP I could gain. And that's a neat moment.
But the cool thing about that, though, the way keys are written, you can also buy them off. So if you decide, I'm going to take this my friends are dying, and the only thing I can do is be heroic, then you have this opportunity to say, well, I've done something heroic, so I can choose to I can choose to play this like a one-time deal where I just panic, I did what I needed to do, and continue to be a coward. Or you can say, this is a turning point in my character's development, and now he has learned to be courageous. And you can adopt a new key.
A turning point where you buy off Key of the Coward, never to be taken again, and buy a new key, Key of the Hero.
That's again an organic kind of character growth.
Exactly. I was just going to point that out. I really love the way that works because then it's just another way to see how your character grows and progresses.
Sure.
But I also personally don't like keys as a player because it tends to become a focus of gameplay.
It can.
And it did for me in this latest Werewolf game. I have played in games where I've loved the keys, and they worked very, very well. But for some reason in this Werewolf game, they turned into a focus, and I was always looking for a chance to gain XP because everyone else was raking in XP, it seemed, and opportunities just weren't coming up for my character.
Yes.
And it was distracting, and I was just like, I just want to tell a story. I really love the story we're telling, and I want to take more part in it, but I'm being distracted by having to look for all these experiences to gain XP.
And the experience system should never be distracting to the story.
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
So I think that's all we'll say about keys, but I will say that there is a D20 adaptation of the key system called Sweet 20 that's definitely going to be in the notes.
Yes.
And we'll send the link to it, and it's a really interesting way to look at even a traditional leveling system like D&D, and it can add a lot of flavor to your adventuring party.
I have not seen that. I'll look forward to seeing it.
We'll link it in there.
Yes, we will. I think that might be all the time we have to talk about this. This subject might be for 2 episodes.
Maybe.
We're at 43 minutes right now.
Okay, we can call it.
So we'll be visiting experience systems again.
We'll look forward to some future experience, because there's some really interesting techniques out there that we'll definitely revisit.
Many of them that I don't think that I've seen.
I guarantee you haven't seen.
So I will be looking forward to that as well.
Okay.
All right. Well, just to sign off, remind everyone to send us an email at sharkbonecast@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, any topic ideas. Send them our way, or if you just want to say hi.
We'll take a hi.
We can take a hi. And if you ever see us on Gmail chat, feel free to message us.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem.
Not a problem.
We'll see you next time, guys.